On today's show, who will be the final two teams in the playoffs and how will injuries impact tonight's play-in games? Plus, do the Knicks have an answer for Joel Embiid and do the Sixers have an answer for the Knicks? All of that and more on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA Friday. Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We're going to get to who has the edge between the Knicks and the 76ers, our newest playoff series, decided on Wednesday night. We'll talk about that here in a second, but let's start with tonight's play-in games to decide the final two teams in the playoffs. We have the Pelicans versus the Kings and the Heat versus the Bulls on Friday night. Adam, let's start in the West. Who do you think has the edge in Pelicans-Kings? What stands out to you about tonight's matchup?
Well, what stands out to me is you lost Zion Williamson last game. In the final 2 minutes of the game, you lose him, and he's out for this one. And then you might have lost Brandon Ingram, who was pouting and throwing a fit in the last game and reportedly left the arena early. So to me, if you just talked about one game momentum, which I know is kind of a silly thing, the Pelicans, it would be a little surprising for them to bounce back, given that the guy who they're going to need to bring them home, Brandon Ingram, seemed to be at an emotional and motivational all-time low exiting the game. Whereas on the other side, Sacramento Kings have long been, dominated by the Golden State Warriors. And so they're riding a high of being the ones that got to put the death kill to the Warriors team. And I just feel like they have some momentum coming into it. So I'm being a bit of a recency bias guy here, but I like the momentum that the Kings are bringing into this game, and I hate the momentum the Pelicans are. So I like the Kings.
I'm not sure I'm there with you yet. I hear you on the vibes, like vibe check wise. Kings up here, very high in the power rankings. Pelicans very low in the vibe check power rankings. And I do think that matters when we're talking about one game, right? This isn't a 7-game series where you can kind of work your way out of it and do your best, and maybe one good quarter, even in a loss, can kind of change momentum. No, that's not happening in this one. But the no Zion thing, I think most people would be picking the Kings based on what they're coming off of against the Warriors and the fact that the Pelicans are going to be without Zion Williamson. It just seems like all momentum is shifting towards Sacramento. FanDuel has the Pelicans as 1.5-point favorites in this game, and the Pelicans obviously are the home team, but that's basically a pick 'em. Yeah, and that does not seem to sort of jibe with public sentiment. In other words, and that line may change, but I thought
public sentiments is purely vibes based. As am I, Wes. We know this.
We were all vibes based. Obviously they'll be without Zion, the Pelicans, but they are 7-5 in games without Zion Williamson this season, and that included a 133-100 win over the Kings earlier in the year. Now, the Pelicans shot 54% in that game. The Kings shot 33%. That's the game. That's essentially what it was, and then some weird rebounding advantage also in that game. But I mean, it's one game, Adam. Like, that's all it takes. Trade Murphy, CJ McCollum, like these guys just go off, and next thing you know, the Pelicans be walking back into the playoffs. Probably still won't have Zion. Who knows about this Brandon Ingram situation? But they could at least win this game in advance. And that's essentially what it comes down to. In terms of like the X's and O's thing, I think they have the wings to guard De'Aaron Fox. Can Jonas Valanciunas kind of stand up to the double-double cocktail of Domantas Sabonis? And there's reasons why maybe you could talk yourself into the Pelicans here.
Well, you're talking about the Lithuanian matchup there, the two Lithuanians. But, look, there's a reason that the Pelicans are 5-0, not 4-0, 5-0, thanks to the play-in tournament against this team this year. This would be 6-0 pre-playoffs, which I don't know if that's ever happened. Has a team ever beaten a team 6 times before the playoffs in one season? That being said, to me, it's just so much is about Zion. He's the reason that they had such a hard time. We talked about this. This game fell on our show a week ago, I believe it was, where we were talking about how Zion was the X factor, or was the main factor in that, and that Harrison Barnes is the guy guarding him. They just don't have a body size for him. So for me, everything is downstream of that when you talk about this matchup. But when you remove him from it, forget the vibes piece of it. When you remove him from it, all of a sudden the Kings are able to they're not exploited for not having one component of their roster, the big beefy power forward to throw out there. Now that that's no longer going to be a factor, I think it's more of an even matchup. And I like the 2-man game that you have between Sabonis and Fox. And Wes, one of my big theories about playoffs and who I pick to win in any given series, how well does the team know themselves? Do they know who they are? I think that the Kings have been together now for 2 years. They know who they are. They're a flawed team, but they know who they are.
Yeah.
They know what they're going to try to do and how they win. And I think the Pelicans, without Zion now and this Ingram piece, they might be the team that least knows themselves in all of the last remaining teams. So that's why I think that I go to the King side on this.
With what Keon Ellis was able to do against Steph and just sort of flying around on defense, he could probably do that on CJ McCollum. And so now maybe you're taking that other sort of X factor variable out of sort of the Pelicans formula here. I also love the Pelicans' ability to switch everything. Like if you put Herb Jones on De'Aaron Fox and you just swallow him up, and then even if Fox and Sabonis go into that 2-man game pick and roll, Herb Jones could switch that. He could get on Sabonis and hold the zone out there by the free throw line and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely X's and O's things either way. But the point you make is such a good one, right? Like it just still sort of feels like, all right, the Pelicans can win this. It's one game. Of course they can win this if they hit a bunch of threes, and Sacramento doesn't. Right. And but in terms of vibes and in terms of who just has the better players available, I also think it's the Kings. So probably that's where we are. I'd probably pick Sacramento, but I wouldn't be shocked either way. And I think that FanDuel line is accurate. Like this to me just feels like a pick 'em. Let's move on.
By the way, Jose Alvarado, real quick, is such a major X factor for the Pelicans, and I don't know that he'll have the same impact in this series against the De'Aaron Fox.
Dealing with the ankle injury.
Yeah. So I think that is hard. Like your X factor, your main factor's out, and your X factor is hobbled. And by the way, maybe not the best matchup there. We'll see.
Let's talk about Bulls Heat. This game will be played in Miami. Chicago coming off that big dominant win over the Hawks on Wednesday. The Hawks sort of came back in that one, but never really felt close. The Heat, disappointing loss against the Sixers in Philadelphia on Wednesday. Most disappointing of all. Looks like they're going to be without Jimmy Butler for an extended period of time. As you and I are recording this, we still haven't gotten the official word on the MRI, but all reporting around it sounds like he's going to be out for an extended amount of time. And if he does somehow miraculously play Friday night, it's probably going to be a limited version of Jimmy Butler. Adam, my question to you is simple. Is there any hope left for the Miami Heat? Is this thing over?
I don't think it's over. I mean, there's hope. Well, first of all, I was going to make a joke about Jimmy playing in this game would actually be hilarious. It fits Jim. There's no other player. If we were talking about any other player, it's like, man, that's a bummer. He's out for months. Jimmy is the type of guy I could just see him being like, I just got to play through it now. No MCL. It's not a big deal. I wasn't even barely using my MCL.
I don't even need that. I got another MCL. Who cares? Take my kidney out, put it in my knee. We're going to be, we'll be good to go.
But short of that,
after the game, he did sound a little down, kind of acknowledging like it's probably not good. Now, what does that mean? Who knows? But
yeah. And he's in a contract year, right?
Well, he's up for an extension.
Oh, okay. That's different.
But he does have technically 2 more years left on his deal. If he gets the extension, you have to obviously drop the player option 2 years from now, etc. But
there you go. I don't think it's hopeless though. Look, Bam Adebayo has to be better in this one.
Yes,
he has to be a bit more of a two-way player in this one. I think Jaime Jaquez has to have. I actually liked the game that he had last night, or I'm sorry, on Wednesday, minus like a few pockets here, including in the clutch. He had some plays that I thought really sunk them. But he has to be better. And then Tyler Hero has to make shots. 27. What do you think about Wednesday's game when he took 27 shots? Some of that is by design. They go to him in the clutch. But you look at the shot distribution in that game, almost 3 times as many shots as the second most shot taker.
Look, I had no problem with him taking those shots. I actually went back and watched all of them. I thought they were all fine. With Jimmy Butler hobbled, he basically planting himself in the corner and being a non-factor on offense. They didn't really have any other options to go to. There was no Terry Rozier in that game. Duncan Robinson wasn't able to go in that game. So it was basically just Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo running high screen and roll, and that was the extent of the offense. And Jaime did get some stuff off of that action, but he can't. Like Philadelphia plays that drop defense. Hero comes across that screen, across the Bam Adebayo screen. He's got an open pull-up jumper. He just wasn't making them. My problem isn't that he was taking them. My problem was that he wasn't making them. He needs to make those. Like those are the moments that Tyler Hero has been wanting, right? Give me the playoff moment. Let me prove myself. And he had a chance, and it did slip through his fingers. And I think that's sort of the disappointing part about it. But I have no problem with the volume of shots because somebody had to take shots in an offense that was otherwise not doing a whole lot. So I do think that. Despite the Jimmy Butler injury, and by the way, it does sound like Alex Caruso might try to play through this thing on Friday, but he's dealing with an ankle that might keep him out or certainly limit him. I do still think that there's a route for the Heat to win this game. We'll talk about that next here before we get into Sixers Knicks after this on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? Well, with Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. I'll tell you, Yahoo Finance as a sponsor has been a godsend for me. For some reason, I ended up through the years ending up with a bunch of different accounts in a bunch of different places. I could just throw them all in one hub for Yahoo Finance, have one tab open on my browser, and keep track. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. So the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and everything else you could possibly need. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view with your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures that you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150. Win or lose, bet on everything from slap shots or home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. We mentioned that Kings-Pelicans line. If you're feeling strongly one way or the other, Pelicans plus 1.5-point favorites. We kind of laid out the Kings vibe case there. Bet on the vibes. 1.5-point favorites, $150 in bonus bets. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Before we jump into a preview of Sixers Knicks, let's finish off our conversation for tonight's play-in game in Miami. I do think that there's a road, Adam, for Miami to still win this game, despite the bad vibes that they got going on, right? Like, it's just a clash of vibes. We got bad vibes in the Western Conference, really tough vibes happening right now in Miami with the Jimmy Butler news and all of that. But the first thing that they have to do, to me, this comes down to Kobe White versus Bam Adebayo. Kobe White, 42 points in that play-in game, the best player on the court in that game, an absolute star performance. Bam Adebayo, not necessarily the case Wednesday. They need a huge game from Bam. And the thing is, Bam Adebayo has had success over the Bulls this season. He only played in 2 games way back in November, but he scored 23.5 points on 61.5% shooting in like that home-and-home baseball series in Chicago in November. Vucevic, Andre Drummond, those guys can't keep up with Bam. Chicago's going to press up their bigs to kind of get out on the perimeter. And Bam Adebayo, time and time again, earlier this year, would just blow by them for on pick-and-roll layups, alley-oops. Heck, the Heat can even ISO him on one side of the floor, clear out, and just let him go to work on either of those guys. He could face up those guys and blow by them. Like, this is a game that is so... This is the game where the Heat need a star version of Bam Adebayo. If he could be that two-way star, then I do think that that's sort of the road the Heat can go down and maybe get this win and still advance to the playoffs despite everything that's going on. And that says nothing about their long-term viability as a playoff team with Jimmy Butler, but they can win this game on Friday night.
So I actually think that you're almost reducing it more than I would, which is to say, you said Bam Adebayo versus Kobe White. Here's why I think this game is actually interesting. I think the best players team will win. And I think there's a lot of players who that could be. Right. That could be, you could talk about even a DeRozan, you could talk about a Hero, you can talk about a bunch of different guys that can, on this game, be the best player on the court. And that's why it's fascinating. Usually when you go into a one-off game or something like this, it's LeBron or Steph who's going to step up, KD or Kawhi who's going to be the one to make an imprint. This is one where you could make a case for 4 or 5. I mean, I'll throw Jaime Jaquez in there as a guy. You could even say Vucevic if he, changes the complexion of the front court game. You want to get crazy and say Andre Drummond can be the guy? Like honestly, he could win you some minutes that are really impactful here. So whoever has the best player on the court is going to be the team that wins. And there's so many candidates.
That's the thing. I mean, that's what happened in that Sixers game. We talked about like Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler's injury, Bam not being aggressive, but it was Nick Batum scoring 20 points. That's essentially why the Sixers won a one possession game. And so you're exactly right when you say, like, I mean, that's sort of the variance part of the play-in tournament. It's why you try to avoid it in the first place, right? Is so that you don't run into a hot hand Nick Batum. That could happen with anybody in either of these games. So it's a fair point. I just think that the Heat need to reach a base level where they weren't against Philadelphia, because Jimmy Butler was hobbled, because Tyler Hero's shots weren't going in, and Bam Adebayo can be that baseline that X factor can sort of just build on top of. Right?
Were you bothered by Bam's game?
I was bothered. I was bothered in the sense that I thought he would be a little bit more aggressive, but I understand like early foul trouble with the 2 fouls, and then he kind of had to go off the floor, and it took him out of rhythm. But considering that Joel Embiid was trying to move the least amount as possible, I did find it a little curious that they didn't just give Bam the ball 19 feet away from the basket and just try to let him blow by, because Joel Embiid didn't want that smoke. He wanted no part of any sort of stress test on Wednesday. So I would bet that that's probably a regret that Eric Spoelstra has coming off that game, is, yeah, we probably should have directed more of our offense towards Bam. But maybe that's the lesson that they needed, and said, you know what, we didn't get you the ball enough Wednesday. Let's make sure we get you the ball plenty on Friday night at home. So that could be the situation. Let's move on to our Philadelphia versus Knicks series. Of course, we learned about this Wednesday night when the Sixers did beat the Heat. Just quick thoughts on Sixers Knicks. What stands out to you about this series? What are you watching for?
Well, you just said something about Joel Embiid. He had no interest in sort of coming out on the perimeter and guarding, or I don't remember the phrasing you used, but it was perfect. How about Jalen Brunson? Is that a kind of guy that's like pretty easy to guard out on the perimeter? I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Embiid looked not healthy. And anytime we talk about the 76ers, they're not winning a series against the Knicks without a healthy Embiid. He has to make an imprint on this series, and he's not going to make it just on jumpers. Jumpers are a big part of his game. He's good at them, but he has to make an imprint on this defensively, and he has to make it drawing fouls in the paint and at the rim. And he did not look like a guy who would be capable of doing those last parts. He can make some shots. He can make a play here or there. He can draw double teams and pass out of them. That's part of his game. He has that. But any part that requires movement, and guarding Jaylen Brown is like one of the toughest assignments in terms of a big stepping out on pick and rolls and guarding movement. He didn't look like to your point, he didn't look like he even had the ability to try at that. And the Knicks, I think, are just going to make him do that 1,000 times a game.
Tom Thibodeau is smart, and I think one of Tibbs' biggest strengths is he's able to simplify things in a great way, whether it's, his rotations or his game plans. And in this instance, I think he's just going to say, we're going to attack Joel Embiid, we're going to make him defend, and we're going to wear him out, because this is a dude who visibly just puts his hands on his knees and like crumbles to the floor during free throw attempts because he's so exhausted lately, because he's just not healthy. And he looked probably as bad as I've seen him in that playing game. So who knows? Like, does he find the fountain of health at some point between now and this series? Perhaps he looks a lot better. But if he looks anything close to what he looked like on Wednesday against the Heat, then then the Sixers are in a lot of trouble. You're absolutely right about Jalen Brunson. Just high pick and roll with him and Hartenstein or Mitchell Robinson or whichever center's in the game, and make Embiid guard. And Kelly Oubre's been better defensively, and I think people give him credit for. They've got other defenders, but I don't know that anybody's going to be able to stop Jalen Brunson. And then on the flip side, you mentioned sort of the double teams in Joel Embiid. Like, when he does find a way to be an impact, it's almost as decoy is probably not a fair word, but just like as a thing that you have to pay attention to. And then he's able to kind of spray out and get the ball to other people. He had some big offensive rebounds and did make some shots late in that Heat game. But the Knicks have some weapons for when Joel Embiid's got the ball in the low block and is trying to pass out of that double team. And specifically, I'm talking about like OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, guys who are really good at coming late for that double, blindsiding that guy in the low post and swiping at the ball. OG Anunoby in particular is so good at that. They haven't played each other in a while. Joel Embiid has not seen a Knicks team with OG Anunoby all season long. But the last time that these teams played, Anunoby spent most of his time on Tobias Harris. basically just playing off of Tobias Harris and kind of mucking
Right.
things up in passing lanes and stuff. And so you kind of add that element to this, where Joel Embiid's going to get the ball in the low block, unhealthy, maybe hobbled Joel Embiid, and OG's just there playing off of Tobias Harris, swiping at the ball. That could be a lot of trouble, not just for Embiid, but for the Sixers offense in general.
Yeah, I think you're right about it. The more I think about the series and the more I saw Embiid, I mean, here's the thing. This is what it all comes down to. Do you believe Embiid can be better than what he was in this one? This was his first game back after missing a few, maybe it bounces back, but can he be better than what he was? Can he muster more?
I think he can. I don't know if it's about like a muster, but it's sort of like
Just if he's capable.
If he's capable, and then can he do it for a game? Sure, probably.
Right.
Can he do it for 4 in a 7-game series against
the Knicks? Are not going to
team?
make this easy. The Knicks are not going to allow him to be like, all right, let me get in my zone. Let me kind of get comfy here.
And it's only 2 nights off, before they have to play their game 1 in New York on Saturday night. So I think he just needs, if he can I would probably peg him at 50%.
Okay.
That's probably where he was Wednesday. He probably needs to be 75 to 80% for the Sixers to have a chance. Can he make that 25 to 30% leap in health?
I hope so, man, because I love this series.
Yes, this is so great.
I was so excited for this one, but after watching, Wednesday's game, I look at it and I go, I don't know, man. That doesn't right. They don't look like they're about to challenge the Knicks at all.
They don't. All right, we are going to get to our countdown to the weekend after this. It's coming up next on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn Jobs isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even have just launched a new feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. It's Friday, which means it's time to count down to the weekend with our weekly power rankings.
I am a system player.
Go power rankings. Go power rankings.
We are counting down the playoff series from the least interesting to the most interesting. Starting with the least interesting, Adam, what do we got?
It's a series. We don't even know what it is yet. I'm taking the Celtics and whoever comes out of the Bulls or the Heat series.
The mystery element not doing it for you.
The mystery element not quite doing it. Doesn't really change. I think the Celtics are significantly better. They'll be well rested. To me, that seems like if the Celtics don't win in a sweep, I think that we might start to talk like, all right, are we sure the Celtics are the juggernaut we thought? They should win this one in a sweep. They're far superior, and I just don't think it'll be that compelling.
So either way, if one of these teams, Miami or Chicago, go into Boston and steal one of those first games on the road, Boston radio waves for 24, 48 hours are going to be going nuts. But especially so, Adam, if it's Miami, if it's the Heat, the zombie Heat that go in.
Oh, the zombie version of the Heat even. Like, not even the Jimmy Butler Heat, the zombiest
It's like a zombie heat in like The Walking Dead where that zombie's got one arm cut off. It's got like a knife in its scapula. Like it's just barely holding on, but it's still trying to climb through the window and eat your brains.
Yeah, that would be it.
That would be it. What's the next one?
The next one I have, so here's the thing, Wes. When we were doing this together just before we did the show, the cutoff of where I'm not interested ended there. That's the only series I'm not that interested in. I'm interested in all of these. So when I say my next one, I don't want people coming at me saying, "Oh, you're not interested." But I'm actually very invested in it. I don't know if everyone else will be, but Cavs Magic to me.
Yep.
And let me give a case for why it's so interesting, even though it's second to last. Banchero versus Mobley. We rarely get young, upcoming star players at the same position going head to head. And that's what we have in this one. At the same time, you got a great defensive backcourt, led by Jalen Suggs going up against Donovan Mitchell. So the one-on-one battles here are actually pretty compelling. I think this will be a good series.
So there's a lot that's interesting about this. Maybe the thing that interests me the most is sort of more macro. It's one team under a ton of pressure in the Cavaliers, and one that's literally just happy to be here. And I know Magic fans want to win, but it's like the Magic just got onto college campus. This is their first time in the playoffs, basically since the Dwight Howard era. They're still just trying to figure out how the meal plan works. They're just trying to find out where they're supposed to go for what classes. Like, that's just what they're doing here. Like, if the Cavs lose this series, it feels like the direction of this franchise is going in a completely new direction. That there could be a lot of different roster changes. And here's the thing. The Magic are kind of a bad matchup for them. You mentioned the Jalen Suggs element. Donovan Mitchell doesn't want any part of that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a great draw in the first round. But you even think about what gave the Cavaliers fits in the playoffs last year, the physicality of the Knicks in that first round. The Magic are physical, man. Like, that front line, those are a bunch of MFers, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. Like, those guys are physical. They're going to pound. Paolo Banchero is going to get to the glass. Franz Wagner hasn't been shooting it all that well, but he still plays really physical. Jalen Suggs is going to mess things up, going over those screens and stuff. So the Cavaliers, the same thing that kind of torpedoed their playoffs last year. The Magic aren't the Knicks. They don't have the pedigree, but they have a lot of the same qualities as that team from last year in terms of they're just going to take it to you. They're going to make you work on every single possession.
Yeah. So I think, and then by the way, Breakout Star, I think maybe the talk of the first round, if you start to say, okay, who's going to be the guy, not the names. We all know the names. Jonathan Isaac. I think there's breakout potential here in terms of he's the guy that everyone's talking about. Oh my God, this performance from Jonathan Isaac. He's on the short list of guys I think could do that.
It'll be great for his church group.
Come on now. Next up, and this one pains me to say it, but when you get to the injuries and stuff that have happened, Bucks Pacers, I think it'll be a very good series. This one has upset potential. You're talking about the Pacers here. I mean, you might even pick the Pacers. I think I might even pick the Pacers given Giannis's health. But because of Giannis's health, the series is a little less compelling. It feels a little bit more like a series that no matter what happens, what do we draw from it? And I mean, again, there's things we'll draw from it, but that's why it got knocked down. It's just the injury portion of this.
Yeah, and even beyond the Giannis thing, which is certainly the biggest injury, but like Dame doesn't feel quite right. Tyrese Halliburton's dealing with this lingering hamstring issue. He's kind of limping into the playoffs too, but it would have been really cool to see Dame time. The return of Dame time has not been in the playoffs since 2021 versus the up-and-comer Tyrese Halliburton trying to snatch that crown as maybe best guard in the Eastern Conference right now. There could have been so much more potential here and for this to rank higher, but I'm with you. And I actually might be with you in terms of probably picking the Pacers in this one because of Giannis. So
yeah, I think so. Next up on my list, the other game that we don't know the opponent to, the Thunder and whoever comes out of Kings and Pelicans. I'm actually pretty interested in this one just because the Thunder, again, they are in prove it mode. They're the number 1 seed, but first time really on this stage. So I'm curious to see how they perform. And then, the Pelicans matchup without Zion, that one takes a little wind out of the sail. But if you get the Kings, I always say the Kings last year were in the Thunder's position. They were a high seed, but people were like, oh, that's a weak higher seed though. That's who you want. The Kings now have a chance to go in after last year losing in Game 7 to now go in on the other side of that. They get to be the upset of that of them. And I just think there's a lot of fun players. I think it'll be an entertaining series. That
thing you said about what people are saying about the Thunder,
you
know that the Thunder have heard that, right?
Yep.
And I cannot wait for them to come out and be like, oh yeah, you guys thought we were the weak number 1 seed. This is who you wanted to face in the first round. All this talk about should the Lakers tank that first play-in game and all this stuff. Yeah, they're going to come out. I am interested in this series just because of the Thunder. I'm honestly not that interested to watch New Orleans or Sacramento anymore with all the injuries that have sort of impacted those rosters. But this is sort of a movie that like Tom Cruise is carrying and just like a bunch of other actors who you don't really care about. And I'm like, I'm going to go see it. It's still Tom Cruise. It's still the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're probably my favorite team to watch all season.
So
I'm watching
fun.
this series.
Yeah. My next one, as we get in the top 4 here, 76ers Knicks. Wes, 36 hours ago, this one might have come in number 1 for me. That's how exciting it would have been. seeing Joel Embiid kind of limp up and down the court and barely be able to move took a lot of the wind out of the sail. I hope I'm wrong, and
Right.
this ends up Embiid's actually awesome in the series, and we get a really great one. If that's the case, it moves up to maybe number one. But because I don't expect that to happen, I think it might just end up being an ugly series that the healthiest of the two teams is going to shine in.
Yeah, things seem to be breaking the Celtics' way, right? With Embiid hobbled, Jimmy Butler hurt, Giannis hurt. It feels like this is laying out pretty favorably for Boston.
Yeah. Number 3, Nuggets Lakers. Now this one's an interesting one. Look, I'm biased on this one. We all know the Nuggets are my team, but it's a rematch of last year, which was a very contentious one. If you remember, there was a lot of trash talk, namely from one Michael Malone in post game, very upset with all of the commentary about the Lakers throughout that series. So there's some bad blood. The Lakers had some conversations in the offseason, I'm told, from Anthony Davis. So, the Lakers, at least in the offseason, this is what they wanted. I think the Nuggets want this one as well. So it's two teams that actually have some bad blood. I think it makes for a compelling matchup.
And I think I have this right. I think I saw it reported that the Lakers flew into Denver 2 days early or something, or planning on it, so that they can sort of ingratiate themselves into whatever it is.
That's the altitude. Yeah, that's not going to work.
Altitude or something. But
2 extra days. Are they riding their bike up Mount Evans and stuff? Like, what are we doing here?
I like to picture them doing that. LeBron just like hiking or whatever you guys do in Denver. I just assume like going to the Patagonia outlet factory.
That's what it is. Yep,
loading up.
Which one do you mean? Are you talking about the one up north, or the one on the west side, or
the one up 67th, or the one?
Okay.
Yeah. No. That's what I like. You already laid it out. This is gonna be an awesome series. I don't think you're biased at all.
All right, the top two to me are just so clearly the top two. The Wolves and the Suns. Talk about tough draw for the Timberwolves. Talk about some bad blood. These two teams played in the last week of the season, and they were jawing at each other nonstop. It was very contentious. I think this is going to be a styles make fights matchup. You have the return of Karl-Anthony Towns, and this Suns team can beat anybody and lose to anybody. I think that this is going to be a insane series with some crazy swings. I would not be surprised if we declare this series over after one game, only to declare it over in the other direction after another game, only to go back and then to the original point. I think this will be a series that has some wild swings. Even though the Suns have had the Wolves' number, it's really hard to keep beating a team this many times. I think it's going to be a great series.
I have 3 words for you. Anthony Devontae Edwards.
I did not know Devontae there. That's a surprise.
That's the middle name. Yeah, just
there
look
you
it
go.
up. He went... I love the idea of him just going toe-to-toe with Devin Booker, toe-to-toe with Kevin Durant, toe-to-toe with Bradley Beal. He's like, okay, you guys who own like the last decade of NBA basketball, I'm here. It's my playoff moment. Win or lose, I don't care for Anthony Edwards. I just want to see him go head-to-head with these guys. I think it's going to be fascinating. I love his competitive mean streak. And it feels like that's the one thing that the Suns don't really have. I'm not like doubting sort of the competitiveness of guys like KD and Devin Booker and those guys, but it just feels like when the Timberwolves are playing with like their most umphiest kind of style, I don't know that the Suns can match that. This is a battle of styles, right? And the Suns have been able to sort of set the terms of engagement for the regular season series, but that doesn't really mean that they're going to do it going forward, to your point, Adam, in a playoff series that the Timberwolves have home court advantage in. Like they get these first 2 games in Minnesota. Can they set the tone for the series? It'll be really interesting.
And that leaves the last one, the Mavs and the Clippers.
Yeah, let's go.
The star power in this one, man. I mean, let's just talk about it. You got Kyrie and Luka. You've got Harden, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Russell Westbrook on the other side. You've got history between these teams. And what makes a series ultimately so great? The stakes. Luka loses in the first round. They're the hot pick right now. Like Luka personally, MVP candidate, has a very strong argument, should be the MVP. If you go out in the first round after missing the playoffs last year, that is a giant stain on your individual. The conversation around Luka next year would get so toxic. I'm telling you, I promise you that's how it'll go.
Yeah.
And on the other side, the Clippers, they assembled this team how many years ago? 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. If you go out in the first round now to an upstart group, it's big. So both of these teams losing in the first round would be horrible, as is the case for Suns, by the way, Suns Wolves in the that we just talked about. The stakes, one of those teams is going to go home, and the conversation around them is going to be completely different.
I'm with you. I love knowing that one of these fan bases is just going to be the dog sitting on a chair in the middle of a fire saying this is fine by the end of by the summer. You know, like It's just it's bound to happen. And I think like what we were talking about earlier with some of the vibes heavily in Dallas's favor, not so much in the Clippers' favor, but stuff like that can turn in the course of a 7-game series pretty quickly, right? Like Kawhi Leonard could come out and look great, and next thing you know, like Mavericks fans are like, "Oh boy, wasn't expecting this. Wow, now they have answers for everything that we want to do on the perimeter for Luka and Kyrie, or the closest thing to an answer that exists when we're talking about those two guys." You know, this can change. This is to me very close to a pick'em series. I'd probably still pick Dallas, based on just how they've played going into the playoffs versus how the Clippers have played, and I just have a lot of questions about the Clippers' defense and their overall level of engagement, especially when the Mavericks can get out on the run and test their transition defense, which has been just ugly all year. But to me, this is a pick'em series. I don't think that you can overlook any one of these. And then what's crazy is that even if this thing goes 6 or 7 games and it's close, everything you just laid out still applies. It's not going to matter if the series is close. There's no moral victories coming out of this thing. There's just Judgment Day, and
just judgments.
That's it, man. That's it.
It's going to be great. I honestly, in all sincerity, I'm not excited for the Celtics series. I am excited for every other one. And you know what? Heat, Bulls, maybe you surprise me. Maybe we get a Kobe White 50 piece instead of a 40 piece. You know, who knows?
I wish you said Tyler Hero instead, but
that's what I meant. Sorry. I meant Jaime Jaquez.
Jaime Jaquez. All right, that'll do it for today's Locked On NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Everydayers, make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts.